What if I told you that the very tool you trust most to feel a fish, that expensive rod you saved up for, is the exact thing stopping you from feeling the bite? It sounds crazy, I know. But today we're going to talk about your winter fishing rod, and more specifically how that ultra-sensitive, high-modulus graphite rod might be the biggest liar in your tackle box. For years, we've been told that sensitivity is everything, that we need to feel the slightest tick. But the truth is much more complicated. By the end of this video, you will understand the real reason you've been missing all those subtle, frustrating bites. I promise you, this is a simple truth that could completely change your success on the ice this winter. It's not about a brand, it's not about price, it's about a fundamental misunderstanding of what a bite actually is. So think about your go-to winter rod right now. Do you trust it 100% to tell you what's going on down there? Let me know in the comments before we even start. I'm curious to see what you think. Let's set the stage. For as long as most of us have been ice fishing, the message has been hammered into our heads: sensitivity is king. Every fishing magazine, every TV show, every pro staffer in a tackle shop has told us the same story. You need a fast-action, high-modulus graphite rod to feel those light-biting winter fish. So what do? We spend our hard-earned money, we upgrade from fiberglass to graphite, from graphite to better graphite. We look for rods with minimal cork on the handle, or even split grip, based on the theory that less material between your hand and the rod, blank means more feeling. We do this year after year, always chasing that perfect telepathic connection to our lure. And when we have a slow day, when the fish just won't commit, we blame everything else. We blame the barometric pressure, the lure color, the time of day, our choice of spot. We almost never blame the very tool designed for bite detection. This relentless pursuit of feel has created a massive blind spot for anglers, and it's time we shed some light on it. Let's start with a scene every single one of us knows. Picture it. It's 6 a.m. The only sound is the wind and the crunch of snow under your boots. You get your hole drilled, you drop your transducer, and you see them. A school of perch or crappie suspended right where they should be. You drop your favorite tungsten jig down, your eyes glued to the flasher. You're holding your best rod, that crisp, sensitive one. Your knuckles are white, every nerve ending in your hand on high alert, waiting for that signature thump or tick that signals a bite. You see a red line rise up off the bottom to meet your green jig on the screen. It hovers there. It merges with your lure, and then nothing. You feel absolutely nothing. The mark on the flasher swims away. You tell yourself it was a finicky fish, that it just sniffed the bait and left. But what if I told you that fish absolutely ate your jig, and your rod never even whispered the secret to you? That's the reality for thousands of anglers, and it's a frustrating one. The core of the problem lies in a giant myth. The myth of feeling everything. We have this idea that a bite is always a vibration. We imagine the fish coming in, opening its mouth and sucking in the lure with a distinct clunk that travels up the line through the rod and into our hand. And yes, sometimes that does happen, especially with aggressive fish. But that is only one type of bite. A huge percentage of the time, especially with panfish in cold water, the bite is not a vibration at all. It's a change in weight. The fish doesn't slam the bait. It gently inhales it and continues swimming, often in an upward direction. It creates slack. It makes the lure weightless. You're not waiting to feel a tick. You should be looking for the absence of weight. This is the most misunderstood concept in all of ice fishing, and our obsession with feeling vibrations has made us completely blind to these lift bites. Your super rod is designed to detect a tremor, not a gentle lift. It's like using a seismograph to weigh a feather. So let's break down the two types of bites. First, you have the vibration bite. This is the classic strike. A fish moves in aggressively, hits the lure, and the impact sends a high-frequency shock wave up your line. Think of it like plucking a guitar string. That sharp vibration travels incredibly well through tight, rigid materials. This is where your expensive, extra-fast action, high-modulus graphite rod shines. It's basically a tuning fork. It's built to pick up on that specific type of energy and transmit it directly to your hand. It feels amazing, it's satisfying, and it's what manufacturers sell you on. The ads show a rod tip barely moving while the angler feels the electric sensation. The second type of bite, and often the more common one, is the weight bite or the lift bite. The fish simply swims up to the lure, inhales it, and either stays put or slowly swims upward. There is no impact, there is no vibration. The only thing that changes is that the weight of your jig is now supported by the fish, not by your rod tip. Your jig suddenly becomes weightless. That's the bite. Now let's talk about where those super stiff graphite rods truly excel, because they are not useless. They are just specialized tools that we are using for every single job. If you are fishing for aggressive predators like lake trout, pike, or active walleye, that stiff rod is your best friend. When you are using heavy lures with a lot of vibration, like a ripping rap or a spoon that you are actively ripping through the water, that rod stiffness is a huge advantage. It gives you instant feedback on what your lure is doing. You can feel every single flutter of the spoon. You can feel it hit the bottom. And when a 20-pound lake trout comes in and smashes that lure, the rod's rigidity transmits that bone-jarring strike perfectly. It also provides the strong backbone you need to get a solid hook set into a tough, bony mouth. In these specific power fishing situations, the high-modulus graphite rod is undeniably the king. It does exactly what it was designed to do: transmit high-frequency vibrations and drive a hook home with authority. It is a fantastic tool for aggressive fish and aggressive presentations. Here is the critical turning point. The very same quality that makes a stiff rod great for feeling a vibration makes it absolutely terrible for detecting a lift bite. Think about it. That rod is engineered to be rigid. It is designed to resist bending. When a small perch or crappie comes up from below and just slightly lifts your tiny 1-gram tungsten jig, the rod is too stiff to react. The rod, blank, simply does not bend enough to show you that the weight has been removed from the tip. The rod tip stays almost perfectly straight. Your hand feels nothing because there was no impact, no vibration. The fish has the lure in its mouth and you are completely oblivious. The fish holds it for a second, realizes something isn't right, and spits it out. On your flasher, it just looked like a fish came and inspected your lure. In reality, it was a missed opportunity. Your rod, in its quest to be a perfect vibration transmitter, has become a poor weight detector. It's a one-trick pony, and we've been trying to make it win a horse race that requires a completely different skill set. Let me give you a simple analogy to make this crystal clear. Think of your fishing line and rod as a single system, like a guitar string. To get a clear, loud sound, that string needs to be tight. A stiff, high-modulus graphite rod is like a guitar string that is cranked down as tight as it will go. When you pluck it, the vibration bite, it resonates loudly and clearly. You feel everything. It's perfect. Now what happens on a lift bite? The fish comes up and pushes that string, creating slack. What happens when you pluck a loose, slack guitar string? You get a dull, muffled thud, or nothing at all. The energy doesn't travel. Your super stiff rod is always in that tight string mode. It's waiting for a pluck. It is not designed to show you when the tension has been released. In fact, its own stiffness masks that subtle change. It's so rigid that it takes a significant upward pull, far more than a small panfish can provide, to make the blank visibly or tangibly react to a loss of tension. It's a system designed exclusively for detecting tension increases, not tension decreases. The material of the rod blank itself is at the heart of this issue. Let's talk about the two main players, graphite and fiberglass. Graphite, especially high modulus graphite, is incredibly light, stiff, and brittle. Its molecular structure allows it to transmit vibrations very, very quickly. This is what companies market as sensitivity. It's a fast material. When a fish taps the lure, the signal travels up a graphite blank almost instantly. Fiberglass, on the other hand, is a much different beast. It's heavier, more flexible, and has a much slower action. It does not transmit those high-frequency vibrations nearly as well. If you hold a graphite rod and a fiberglass rod and have a friend tap the tips, you will feel the tap much more clearly through the graphite. In a store, the graphite rod will always win the sensitivity test. But on the water, the fiberglass rod's flexibility, its willingness to bend under a light load, is its secret weapon. It visually shows you the lift bite that the graphite rod completely hides. It's a trade-off. You sacrifice some of the feel for a massive gain in visual bite detection. Now let's zoom in on the most important part of the rod for this discussion, the tip. Rods are often described by their action, which really refers to where they bend. An extra-fast action rod bends only in the top 10 to 15%. A moderate action rod bends into the middle of the blank. Your expensive graphite ice rod is almost certainly a fast or extra-fast action. That tip is designed to be a crisp, responsive part of the vibration sensing system. It recovers or straightens out very quickly. This is great for imparting subtle, jigging motions, but for a lift bite, you want the opposite. You want a tip that is soft, a tip that is already slightly bent under the weight of your tiny jig. This is often called a noodle rod or a rod with a very light tip. When a fish lifts that jig, even by a fraction of an inch, that soft tip doesn't need to be convinced to bend. It was already bent, and now it rises. It straightens out. The visual cue is unmissable. It's like watching a float go under, but in reverse. The tip rising is the bite. You aren't feeling anything. You are seeing it. If you still have doubts, consider the lesson of the dead stick. For years, one of the most effective ways to catch finicky fish through the ice has been to use a second rod that just sits there. It's not being held, it's not being jigged, it's just a bait sitting in the water column. And how do you detect a bite on a dead stick? You don't feel it, you use a visual indicator, most commonly a spring bobber. That little wire or spring on the end of the rod is hypersensitive to any change in weight. It's bent down from the weight of the lure. When a fish takes the bait, the spring goes up, it straightens out, or it jiggles. It is a purely visual system. We have accepted for decades that this visual method is deadly effective, yet we refuse to apply the same logic to the rod in our hand. We insist on trying to feel the bite with a stiff rod, while the evidence of a better way is sitting in a rod holder just a few feet away, outfishing us. Your rod tip can and should be your new spring bobber. You just need the right kind of rod. Let's take it a step further. It's not just the rod. You, the angler, are also part of the problem, specifically your hand. On a cold day, your hands are not sensitive instruments. You're wearing gloves or your fingers are numb. Even on a good day, the simple act of gripping the rod handle introduces a variable that dampens sensation. your muscles, your skin, the cork or foam of the handle itself. All of these things absorb and distort the tiny vibrations you are trying to feel. Think about it. Manufacturers go to great lengths to create rod handles that are comfortable and provide a good grip. But comfort and grip are often achieved with materials like cork and EVA foam, which are, by their very nature, vibration dampeners, so you have a super-sensitive blank designed to transmit energy connected to a handle that's designed to absorb it. You might be losing half the signal before it even has a chance to reach your nervous system. By relying solely on what you feel, you are playing a game of broken telephone, where the message gets weaker and more distorted with every connection from the lure to your brain. This brings us to the hero of our story, the rod with a parabolic bend, often called a noodle rod. These are typically made of fiberglass or a soft composite material. When you pick one up in the store, it might feel cheap, flimsy, or unresponsive. It feels dead compared to a crisp graphite rod. It doesn't have that sharp, reactive feel, but that's the entire point. It's not designed for feeling, it's designed for seeing. A parabolic rod bends in a deep, uniform arc, sometimes all the way down to the handle. When you rig it up with even the smallest jig, the tip loads up and stays bent in a gentle curve. This curve is your bite indicator. It's your new baseline. Anything that changes that curve up or down is a fish. When a perch lifts the jig, the curve straightens out. It's a slow, obvious, and unmistakable visual signal. The rod is essentially a giant, highly visible spring bobber. You are taking your cold, unreliable hand out of the equation and trusting your eyes, which are far more reliable sensors for this type of information. I want to share a quick real-life story that completely changed my perspective on this. I was out fishing for crappie on a notoriously tough lake. I was using my pride and joy, a $150 extra-fast solid carbon graphite rod. For an hour, I marked fish constantly on my sonar. They would come up, inspect my lure, and leave. I felt absolutely nothing. I was getting frustrated, blaming the fish. My friend, meanwhile, was using an old, cheap, $20 fiberglass noodle rod that looked like a toy. And he was catching fish after fish. I finally swallowed my pride and asked him what he was feeling. He just laughed and said, "I'm not feeling anything, I'm watching." I watched his rod tip. A fish would come in on the flasher, and his rod tip, which was bent in a deep U shape, would slowly, almost lazily, straighten out by just an inch. That was the bite. He'd set the hook and reel in a crappie. I switched to a similar cheap fiberglass rod I had for my kids, and it was like a light switch flipped. I started seeing all the bites I had been missing for the past hour. They were never going to be felt. They had to be seen. To truly understand why this works, we have to think from the fish's perspective for a moment. Imagine you are a midwinter perch. Your metabolism is slow. You are not trying to expend a lot of energy. You see a small morsel, a tungsten jig that looks like an insect larva. You don't charge it and smash it. You drift over to it, flare your gills and gently inhale it. The water and the bait flow into your mouth. You haven't moved an inch. Then you might slowly swim up or to the side with it. At no point in this process did you create a sharp tick or vibration. All you did was remove the tension from the angler's line. Now, if that line is attached to a stiff rod, the lure feels unnatural resistance almost immediately. The rod tip doesn't give. The fish feels the pull and spits the lure out in a fraction of a second. But if the line is attached to a soft parabolic rod, the tip gives way. It bends and moves with the fish, creating no unnatural resistance. This gives you, the angler, an extra second or two to see the visual cue and set the hook. This leads us to the critical concept of the load up. With a stiff graphite rod, you are waiting for a signal to be sent to you. With a soft fiberglass rod, you are watching the rod react to the fish. When a fish takes the bait and swims away, even slowly, a soft rod begins to bend or load up with the weight of the fish. The tip goes from its normal resting curve to a deeper curve. It's a beautiful, slow-motion signal. The key here is that the rod absorbs the initial energy of the fish's movement, acting as a shock absorber. This prevents the hook from being pulled out of the fish's soft mouth, which is a common problem with stiff rods and light lines. The parabolic bend keeps a steady pressure on the fish throughout the fight. You aren't just getting better bite detection on the front end, you are getting a better tool for fighting and landing the fish on the back end. You will lose fewer fish at the hole because the rod is doing the work for you, flexing and adapting to the fish's head shakes, something a stiff rod just can't do. And I need to make this perfectly clear, this is not about price. In fact, it's the opposite. We've been conditioned to believe that more expensive equals better, but in the case of detecting lift bites from panfish, a $20 cheap fiberglass rod will outperform a $200 top-of-the-line graphite rod 9 times out of 10. This is one of the rare instances in fishing where spending less money can actually lead to catching more fish. It's about using the right tool for the job. You wouldn't use a sledgehammer to tap in a finishing nail. So why are we using a stiff, powerful rod designed for aggressive power fishing to detect the subtle inhale of a 7-inch perch? It makes no sense when you stop and think about it, so get that expensive is better idea out of your head. Your most effective panfish rod might be the cheapest one in the entire store, gathering dust in the corner because it doesn't feel sensitive enough when you wiggle it in the aisle. So here is a simple experiment I want every single one of you to try on your next trip out. It will cost you almost nothing and the results will speak for themselves. Take your best, stiffest, most sensitive graphite rod and then take a cheap fiberglass noodle rod. If you don't have one, borrow one or buy one for $20. Rig them both up with the exact same line and the exact same small tungsten jig. Fish them side by side in 2 different holes. Spend 5 minutes jigging with your graphite rod trying to feel the bite. Then switch to the fiberglass rod. Don't focus on feeling anything. Instead, hold the rod steady and just watch the tip. Focus on that little curve at the end of the rod. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that you will start to see the tip rise and fall in ways you never felt with the other rod. You will see bites that were completely invisible before. This simple side-by-side comparison is the most powerful way to unlearn the habits we've been taught and to prove to yourself that seeing is believing. This all means we need to completely redefine what sensitivity means in the context of ice fishing. For too long, sensitivity has been marketed as a single thing, the ability to feel high-frequency vibrations in your hand. But that is an incomplete and, frankly, a misleading definition. True sensitivity is a rod's total ability to communicate what is happening to your lure at the other end of the line. It is not just one-way communication. It's a dialogue. A truly sensitive system should tell you about vibrations, yes, but it must also tell you about changes in weight, changes in tension, and changes in pressure. A rod that only screams about aggressive bites but is completely silent during subtle lift bites is not sensitive, it is half-deaf. A soft, parabolic rod that communicates those lift bites visually is, by this new definition, a far more sensitive and effective tool for the majority of panfishing situations. We need to expand our definition beyond what we can feel and include what we can see. Of course, we can't forget about the fishing line, which is the first link in this communication chain. The type of line you use interacts with your rod choice in a significant way. Braided line, with its zero stretch, is the ultimate transmitter of vibration. Paired with a stiff graphite rod, it's the most sensitive feeling setup you can have for hard-hitting fish. But that same zero stretch quality can be a disadvantage with soft biting fish, as it offers no forgiveness. Fluorocarbon line sinks has less stretch than monofilament and is nearly invisible, making it a good all-around choice. But the old-school choice, monofilament, might have a hidden advantage here. Its stretch, which is often seen as a negative, can actually work in your favor. When a fish inhales a lure on a monoline, the stretch provides a bit of give, similar to a soft rod tip. This can give the fish a more natural feeling and cause it to hold on to the bait for a fraction of a second longer, giving you more time to react. The ultimate setup might just be a soft, parabolic rod paired with a light fluorocarbon or monofilament line, a perfect combination for visual detection and fighting forgiveness. Now, after everything I've said, I don't want you to go home and throw all your expensive graphite rods in the trash. That is not the message. Those rods are still incredibly important and have their place. They are specialized tools. As we discussed, if you are power fishing for lake trout with heavy spoons, you want that stiff graphite rod. If you are hole hopping for aggressive walleye and ripping lipless crankbaits, you need that stiff rod for lure action and hook setting power. If you are fishing deep water where bite detection becomes more difficult, the sensitivity of graphite and braid can be an advantage. The key is to recognize that it is a tool for a specific job. The mistake we've all been making is treating this specialized tool like it's a universal solution for every species and every situation. Your toolbox should have both a sledgehammer and a tack hammer. The art of becoming a better angler is knowing when to use which one. Stop trying to use your graphite sledgehammer for the delicate work of pan fishing. So, let's bring this all together. Here is the single most important takeaway from this entire discussion. Your best and most sensitive winter rod is probably only best for about 50% of the situations you encounter, specifically those involving aggressive fish and heavy lures. For the other 50%, which includes the vast majority of pan fishing scenarios, that rod is not just a neutral tool, it is actively working against you. Its stiffness, its fast action, its entire design philosophy is built around detecting a type of bite, the vibration bite, that often doesn't happen. It makes you deaf and blind to the far more common lift bite. By focusing all of our attention on trying to feel a tiny tick, we have completely ignored the big, slow, obvious visual signal that a softer rod can provide. We've been listening for a whisper in a hurricane when we should have been looking for a giant, waving flag. The problem isn't the fish and it isn't your skill. It's that you have been unknowingly using the wrong tool for the job, year after year. So, here it is, the big twist. That relentless quest for a rod that lets you feel everything has led the entire industry, and most of us anglers, down a path to a tool that is functionally deaf to the most common type of winter bite, the lift bite. The most surprising and game-changing moment for me was realizing that the real sensitivity I needed wasn't in my fingertips at all. It was in my eyes. It was about choosing a rod that acts like a visual indicator first and a sensory tool second. This simple shift in thinking changes everything. You stop getting frustrated. You stop blaming the fish for being finicky. You start looking at your equipment critically and realize that your setup has been sabotaging your efforts all along. You can finally start catching all those fish that you have been marking on your sonar for years but could never get to commit. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge some old school thinking with me. If this video made you look at your rod rack a little differently, do me a favor and hit that like button, and make sure you subscribe because we've got a lot more fishing myths to bust. Now I have to ask you, take an honest look at your collection of winter rods. Have you been relying too heavily on stiff, sensitive graphite? Are you going to give a softer noodle rod a real try after watching this? Let's get a real discussion going in the comments below. I want to hear all about it.